What up, everybody? After Miguel was introduced to Tommy as Diamond's new business partner at the beginning of season 2, the very next thing that Miguel did was do recon work on Tommy back in New York. Because the next time Tommy went to talk to Miguel, he was by himself this time because Diamond had to deal with his parole officer when Nasi approached him when he first walked up and called him by his full name, Tommy Egan, and let him know that Chico, Julio's boy, back in New York, said what's up. Then Miguel walked out and there was a drive-by from the Serbs where Tommy ended up getting shot protecting Miguel. After this, Miguel and Nasi were talking when Nasi told Miguel that Tommy was crazy. At this point, Miguel told Nasi that Tommy lost everything back in New York, his girl and his business. When Miguel said that, Nasi told him that a guy like that could be dangerous. But Miguel said that he could also be valuable. At this point, Nasi and Tommy as a threat. But Miguel should have listened to Nasi because Tommy ended up being very dangerous, killing Nasi, either though it was in self-defense, but not before backdooring Miguel with his plug Che from the Estrada cartel. But at this point, Miguel was unable to retaliate against Tommy because Che made them come to a peace agreement, not wanting any kind of beef between the two sides because it's bad for business. And we know either though Miguel wants Tommy dead, he's going to follow Che's rules because of the fact he was already following Che's rules and not retaliate against the Serbs after they did the drive-by, and even after Tommy robbed one of his shipments, pinning it on the Serbs. Miguel still didn't retaliate, not until he got the okay from Che. But then Miguel got the text message from Gennard with the photo of Mireya and Tommy together, and Miguel figured out a way to indirectly get to Tommy through Mireya, knowing that this was an area that he could get to Tommy without creating a problem with Che. But we also know from the Season 3 teaser videos that Mireya is safe and will eventually get free at some point in Season 3. And I'm thinking because it's already spoiled from the teaser videos, it'll likely be in Episode 1. And once that takes place, Miguel will have to find another way to get to Tommy. Because right now, Tommy and CBI are about to take over the city of Chicago. Before too long, they'll be leaving Miguel and the Insane Princess with just scraps. And that could also make them look weak in front of Che. But in addition to that, it's also personal between Miguel and Tommy, now that Miguel knows about Tommy's relationship with Mireya. Keep it in mind that Mireya already warned Tommy about what Miguel's done to one of her past boyfriends. Not to mention, we saw for ourselves what he did to Dr. Kendall. So I think Miguel's next move will be reaching back out to his New York connection that got him information regards to Tommy in the first place, to try to dig more into Tommy's history to get dirt on him. Because I definitely don't think that was mentioned for no reason in Season 2. I think it'll come back into play in Season 3, now that Miguel and Tommy are full-blown enemies. But a couple things in regards about how they got this information about Tommy from New York is: who is Miguel's mystery connection in New York? And what is his connections back in New York? When Tommy asked Miguel about how they knew about Julio, Miguel told Tommy that he has eyes everywhere. And also, who's Julio's boy Chico, who ended up giving Miguel's New York contact all the information they got about Tommy? Because when you think about it, Chico, either though he said tell Tommy what's up, he didn't show any kind of loyalty to Tommy either. Because he gave Miguel's people information about Tommy with no kind of hesitation as far as we know. Not knowing if Miguel and his people could have been Tommy's enemies looking for dirt on him. And in regards to Julio's boy Chico, there's also questions like, does Tommy even know who that is? And what was Chico's connection to Julio? Was he a member of the Toros Locos gang that Julio was a part of before Ghost got him out, and that he was ultimately killed for leaving? Keeping in mind that Tommy and Ghost ultimately killed the leader of that gang when they were looking for answers about what happened to Reina. So the Toros Locos is definitely a gang under new management since the time of OG Power. But I also think there could be a chance that Julio's boy Chico doesn't even exist, and Nasi said that just messing with Tommy. Because Miguel's contact back in New York is most likely Latin. They probably knew Tommy through Julio and told Miguel something like, yeah, he used to roll with a guy named Julio. He lost everything in New York, his business and his girl. So knowing that, Nazi could have just made up the name Chico, calling him Julio's boy, saying that to mess with Tommy. But at the same time, if Chico does exist, he could be a Toro's Loco, an enemy of Tommy, saying what's up. Either way, we know that Miguel has eyes in New York, and that could be bad for Tommy. And I also noticed that either though Miguel knew about Julio, Tommy's business, and Keisha, they never said anything about knowing that Tommy faked his death in New York or that people thought he was dead back in New York. So that just lets us know that Miguel has a lot more to learn about Tommy moving forward. And just like he started out season 2 finding out information about Tommy back in New York, I think we'll also see him doing that again in season 3. This time with a completely different attitude, with the intent of taking Tommy out one way or another. And ultimately, I think Miguel's plan, if he gets enough information on Tommy back in New York, would be aligning himself with one of Tommy's enemies back in New York, using the concept, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So this way, Miguel could send problems in Tommy's direction to undermine him and CBI's operation, all while keeping his hands clean when it comes to Che's peace agreement that Miguel has with Tommy. So because of that, one thing that Miguel would need to do would be align himself with a non-Latin ally to make sure that there's no mistakes about who's coming for Tommy. And if they're from out of town, even better. Miguel could tell Che that Tommy Egan's past is catching up with him and that he has nothing to do with it. Similar to how in Power Book 2, Kane tried getting Braden to take out the Russian Connect so it didn't look like he had anything to do with it. And with that said, things could potentially work out perfect for Miguel in that regards if he gets the right information on Tommy back in New York. Because the ideal information that Miguel would find out about Tommy would be the fact that the Sevel mob wants him dead. The Sevel mob could be the perfect ally for Miguel to send after Tommy, all while keeping his hands clean with Che. The Sevel mob's a crime family in New York that we really don't have a lot of information about, because except for that one episode when we were introduced to Carlos and Dolores, the only member of the Sevel mob we really saw in action was Benny. In OG Power, we saw more of the Ragni crime family, led by Vincent, that Tony Teresi used to be a part of. But with that said, at one point, when Vincent and Benny were face to face, Vincent seemed intimidated by Benny, and also intimidated by Carlo when they were face to face. This indicates that the Sevel mob is more powerful and dangerous than Vincent's crew, the Ragni crime family. And we also know that Dolores has 3 brothers who are also part of that family that haven't been introduced on screen yet. And because we know that Tommy is going to be leaving Chicago at the end of season 3, this could be a big part of the reason why. Basically, the same problems that he tried running away from in New York have now found him again in Chicago. Both the Italian mafia, and he also has law enforcement and Stacy Marks breathing down his neck already. So at the end of the day, we might see Tommy continue to try to outrun his problems, flee into a new city. Or will Tommy see it as he's not going to be able to outrun his problems and could return to New York to face them head on? Leave your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments.